This is the Seller Process Podcast, where we talk about the best systems, processes, and SOPs for your Amazon business so that you can regain control of your time, build up your team, and scale your e-com empire.
Hello, entrepreneurs. If you want to finally put an end to your stockouts and become an inventory management master, then this episode is for you. Our guest today will show us how to effectively run through a stockout assessment checklist and create a system that will allow you to manage inventory like a pro. I'm joined today by Chelsea Cohen, an Amazon inventory management expert and the co-founder and CEO of Stock.com, an Amazon inventory management software. Chelsea is also an Amazon seller, speaker, and consultant, and her regular clients include multiple 7- and 8-figure sellers. Hey, Chelsea, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
All right. Yeah. So we already had one episode with you, always talking about inventory, because we know you are the queen of inventory management. Now you're known in the space about this. So, and you, in our pre-interview chat, we discussed about a few topics that were interesting, and something stood up. It was about your way to assess the after assessment, basically. After you run out of stock, you assess basically through a checklist why did that happen, and then how can you move forward, solving those problems. So I think that's a very interesting thing, that a process that most people don't use. So I think it's going to be very interesting to discuss that. So let's start with that. So what is it? What do you mean by a stockout assessment checklist, and why do we need that?
Sure. So a stockout assessment checklist is essentially looking at why the stockout occurred in the first place. And what we normally do as sellers, we deal with the situation at hand at the time, and then we move on. And we don't always look back and see, why did it happen in the first place? So that's what a stockout assessment checklist would do, is to look back at that. And you can even look back. It doesn't have to have happened right now. It could have happened in the last year. So if you have a way of tracking those stockouts, or you can recall those stockouts, you can go through that process, even if you're not dealing with a current stockout.
Right. Okay. I think that's a really smart approach, because as you said, people just run out of stock. They deal with it in that moment, and then they forget about it. So, but they are not putting in place anything that will allow them to don't repeat the same mistake, right? Yeah. So as in every episode, you guys will be able to download this checklist. So remember, you can do it by looking at the show notes of this episode. Go to thesellerprocess.com and you will find the link to download this checklist. So after you do that, you will see that it's divided into 3 main categories. One is stockouts due to faulty inventory management systems, another due to supply delays, and another due to shipping delays. So I think we should go through these 3 steps. Like, what are you suggesting to address? What are the points we should address in our assessment if we find that we ran out of stock because of our basically faulty inventory management system?
Sure. So there are a couple of different things that you would go through at that point. One would be, are you calculating correctly? First of all, are you factoring in past stockouts, or are you looking at seasonality? So those are some things that could throw off your numbers if you're just looking at the hard numbers of what is coming from Amazon. So that would be kind of the first thing. And then the other things would be to look and make sure that you have a buffer stock in place. So do you always keep extra inventory just in case? We recommend 30 days at least worth of inventory at Amazon at any given time, so that you don't run the risk of stocking out.
Okay. And when you say buffer stock, do you mean also just a stock at FBA, or also maybe some other reserve, let's say, in a 3PL or in AWD or somewhere else?
Yes, yeah. 3PL buffer stock is definitely necessary as well. It might not be as much, or depending on your supply chain, but how much do you need to have extra? And then it's always a good idea to have the ability to fulfill by merchant if necessary.
Okay, yeah, that's another good tip. I think it's something that could save lots of listings if you have ready in a 3PL something to ready to go, and go directly to the customer through FBM. Okay, cool. So what else about this category of mismanagement?
Yeah, I would say coordinating with the marketing team, because when you don't have that coordination, the inventory data is just coming from the hard numbers. And I always like to say inventory is management is a science and an art. The science part is the numbers that are coming from your business, from Amazon, past numbers. But what are you doing for future? Do you have lightning deals planned? Do you have promotions planned? Are you starting to change up your listing optimization? Knowing this stuff from the marketing team is very important to have a good forecast and an accurate forecast. And a lot of times when people do stock out, it's because there's a or a lack of coordination between the marketing and the inventory team.
Yeah, for sure. That's also really important. Yeah, planning way in advance, basically this lightning deals or any marketing activity, in order to make sure that we have enough stock. It's also kind of difficult sometimes to understand how much more sales will grow. Like, what are your suggestions to anticipate the amount of growth we will have through a campaign or some other marketing effort?
Yeah, I mean, that comes to kind of the art side of things. Maybe looking at past marketing efforts that you had and the lift from that. If you're working with an agency, maybe asking the agency what they predict, because they work with a lot of different clients and they would be more familiar with the lift for certain campaigns. So always asking, either your marketing team or the marketing agency that you're working with, what they foresee.
Right. Okay, so actually something I'm thinking about when you're talking about marketing efforts or marketing campaigns, it's something that just happened to me recently. It's a nice problem to have, but it was still a problem. So basically, this was one of my least. The lowest selling product. It was selling just maybe 3 or 4 units a day. What was just a product we recently launched, and it wasn't going really well. And one day sales grew to 60 or 70 units per day for a couple of days, and we said, what's that? Well, how did that happen? And then we found out that a big influencer in TikTok, Instagram, she was everywhere. She posted a video about that product. We never contacted her. We just didn't know about that, and she just liked the product and shared it in her social media. But basically 30x our like 20 or 30x our normal daily sales. So that's something like really unusual, obviously, but it lasted for several days. So it was a problem, a good problem, but it was a problem. So obviously in this case, it's not a marketing effort that we anticipated. So then I guess the measures that we could use in that case might be different, right? So what is your take on that?
Yeah, so that would be buffer stock. Having that buffer stock available would help you to navigate that some, and then being able to pay attention to something like that so that you notice it when it does happen. Then you can do what you need in terms of pulling more stock from your 3PL, doing small parcel delivery, something like that. And it's not something that you can plan for necessarily, except for that buffer stock. Having the ability to be flexible with your logistics, be flexible with moving your inventory. And then making sure that you factor that out of the equation when you're doing your future forecasting, so that you don't increase your sales velocity projections more than what is going to happen, because that was kind of an anomaly.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Obviously, yeah, it makes sense. And so, guys, I mean, this is kind of a lesson I've learned, that I didn't run out of stock actually because I had some buffer stock, but just because of that, So I think we should be positive and thinking that we should expect the unexpected. So we should expect that maybe for some reasons our sales will grow. And so we need to have some buffer stock to replace the inventory.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So there is a really good point in this checklist that I'm very curious to ask you about, which is the adoption of a stockout avoidance system. So that's a cool name. Like, how do we make sure that we have in place a stockout avoidance system, and what is it?
Sure. Yeah. So a stockout avoidance system is when, first of all, being able to know when you've got a stockout coming up, being able to have what I call a stockout risk report. So that is setting certain parameters on knowing how much inventory you have, which would be looking at what your sales velocity is, your daily sales velocity, and the total amount of inventory that you have in stock. And then you just divide one number into the other to be able to see what your total days of stock are. Then you can look forward and see, if I have, 30 days left of stock, then I need to have replenished by X date. And so your drop dead, your zero date, so that you can see if you can get inventory in there on time. And if you can't, then that becomes a red flag that you are going to stock out if you don't make a change. So that would be what a stockout risk report would do, which would then allow you to execute on a stockout avoidance action plan, which we can talk about.
What is exactly. So what are the actions that we could take in that you're considering the action plan?
Yeah. So it needs to be acted upon by both your inventory team and your marketing team. And your inventory team would need to look at, what are some ways that I might be able to get inventory in faster? Is this something that I can I avoid this? Can I improve the situation and shorten the stock out? Could I send small parcel delivery? Because that will check in faster. Do I have anything that I can air ship over? And is that cost effective, or is it better to stock out? FBM, and then, of course, running the assessment checklist after that would be the things that you would want to have inventory put in place for that process. Marketing would be a different thing. Marketing would be looking at what promotions are being done, what coupon codes are out there, what PPC campaigns. Maybe you've got some more aggressive ad campaigns. You can cut back on those. Make sure that you're not going to tank your rankings, because sometimes it's better to stock out and then close your listing than it is to end up tanking your listing.
Okay, that's an interesting view. So some people, I think some people say the opposite. Some people agree with you. Some say the opposite. So, It all
depends. One of the things that is actually a little hack, and I learned this from Vanessa Hung, is instead of shutting off your listing when you have zero inventory, that registers in your inventory performance index score as a stockout. If you were to shut your listing off and strand some inventory, let's say you were able to strand inventory with 5 units left, that would register as stranded inventory instead of a stockout, which carries a lot less weight in affecting your inventory performance index score than a stockout does. So that's something to, I think, to enact upon instead would be stranding your inventory so that your in performance index score doesn't suffer.
Okay, wow. Okay, that's a new tip. I never heard about. So yeah, thanks for that. It's cool, interesting. So maybe just closing the listing when there are 1 or 2 units left, or 3, 4 units left instead of 0. So that will impact less the IP score. Okay, interesting. What else we can say about if we run out of stock when caused by the restrictions in the restock limit, which depending on when this is gonna be live, I think we're actually in the process to change to a kind of a new way to manage inventory, right? Amazon is giving limits in terms of cubic feet instead of units, so it's changing. So probably by the time it's going to be live, the people will already have this new process.
Sure.
But what can we do?
Yeah, so restock limits, they are changing to utilizing FBA Capacity Manager, which will go into essentially into your using those cubic feet. But the other aspect, so now you need to know how many cubic feet you actually have. Amazon's Capacity Manager shows that, but it is also, I think, important. We're building a tool right now to be able to tell people what their total units, cubic feet are per unit and total, which I think is important to understanding how much inventory to send in. Because if you don't know, if I send in 1,000 units, how much space is that going to take up? Then you're gonna not be able to make good decisions. So I think that is the first step for people, is getting an understanding of what their cubic feet are. And there's a calculation that you can use for that, which is to take your unit dimensions and multiply them together. And usually they're in inches. And then you divide them by, I believe it's 1,728. And that will give you your cubic feet. And, so you'll have your cubic feet per unit. And then if you want to send 1,000 units in, you multiply your cubic feet per unit by 1,000, then you'll know how much inventory. So maybe making a quick calculator on a spreadsheet would be helpful as you're doing your inventory planning. And then beyond that, I mean, just knowing what your hero products are and really following up with your overstock, your slow sellers, so that the marketing team is actually moving those out, making sure that they're not continuing to sit there clogging up the system and taking up that valuable space. Would be some of the things that I think that are important.
Awesome. Okay, cool. All good tips. We'll see how things will change after this, but I'm kind of positive, because I've seen, at least in my account, we're going to get like a really a big increase in terms of capacity. So we will be able to send much more inventory in FBA, which is a positive thing.
Yeah,
cool.
I've seen that in our account. Yeah, and then you'll be able to place a bid. You'll now be able to bid for more space as well.
Right.
So you can pay a fee, and then if you sell through that inventory, you may or may not be able to get credits back, so that the fee that you suggest, that you say, hey, I'm willing to pay this amount, and then you could potentially win that space. And if you sell enough inventory, that amount that you pay could be less or could be zero. So that's an interesting new twist. It goes more into the realm of PPC bidding, but you're bidding for space on a monthly basis.
Right. I read that today, and I think it's another crazy way that Amazon is coming up with to charge us more. So we'll see how that goes. But so far I think they improved that piece of the system by allowing us to work with cubic feet, and it's a bit more complex, but it makes more sense, and it's easier. It's going to be easier to manage in the long run after you have the right systems. Okay, cool. So let's move on with the checklist. So what if the stockout depends on supplier delays instead? What are the action that we should take?
Yeah. I would say figuring out what those delays are caused by. And usually it's, one of a couple of things. Usually it's they had a problem with getting raw materials, or there were just production problems, and maybe you're dealing with a lead time that is no longer relevant. Maybe you're dealing with, it used to be 30 days, now it's 45 days, and you just haven't adjusted your systems. So you would need to adjust those systems, and just talk to your supplier. What is going on? They're dealing with a lot of crazy things over in China. So if you're sourcing in China, they're having these blackouts where they can only work 4 days instead of 5 days or 6 days, some of them in some regions. And then, like I mentioned, raw material shortages. There was, for a time last year, a raw material shortage in cardboard. So we were getting problems with them not being able to get their hands on enough shipping materials, or the quality of the shipping materials was being degraded. So you got more inventory shrinkage, which then arrives to you, and you have, less inventory than you thought you did. Even if they credit you, it throws off your inventory forecasting because you have less on hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, because I think it's actually something that I really keep an eye on whenever I order new products. Another tip actually I can add to that is that basically I always look at what's the slowest part of the process, of the production process. So you will find that many times the packaging itself is the slowest one. So the printing the packaging, it's very slow. So many times it happened to me that asking the supplier, they told me the product was produced in maybe 5 days, but then it took 3 weeks to print the packaging. So they were giving me the product, the final product after 3 weeks. So the solution to that, it's to basically pre-print the packaging. And so you're gonna spend like really little money you're gonna pay for the packaging in advance. So it's not gonna be like a large portion of the order. So but at least you have packaging ready. And then as soon as you want to place an order, they will just take maybe just 5 days to create the products and pack it and pack them. So look at, my suggestion is to look at what's the slowest part of the production, and then try to make sure that you said that you make that ready in advance, so that you can move faster whenever you place the order.
That's great. Yeah, you could find that you instead of lengthening your lead time, you're shortening it, but you're placing smaller orders or larger orders less frequently to have that extra raw material on hand, and just paying for what they need to pay out of pocket. And that makes them happy sometimes, because it guarantees that you'll have future orders as well.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. So we have now the last part of the checklist. What if the shipping, what if the stockouts depends on shipping delays? What can we do about that?
Yeah. So, the first thing to do is to figure out, where are those delays coming from? There are many places along the supply chain. So is it that your supplier and your freight forwarder maybe aren't as in sync as they could be? Because if you're putting everything on a boat and your freight forwarder maybe isn't replying to emails as quickly, or your supplier doesn't contact them until product is ready to ship versus a couple of days or a week before to get things in place, then what can happen is that you could miss the boat. You could maybe miss the boat by a day because your freight forwarder didn't reply to an email in a timely manner. And then you have to wait another week sometimes, and that can cause delays. So that's the first thing to figure out is what is that communication cycle like from the point that your product is ready or almost ready to the point that it gets on the boat, is the first hurdle to address.
Okay, great. So what if, for example, we have delays with Amazon checking in? That's the biggest one, I would say. Usually, in that part, the final parts of the supply chain.
Mm-hmm, sure. In that case, some of the best solutions are it's something called live unload. So you can what happens is Amazon owns a lot of these trailers. And so when you go through the Amazon system to order your, FTL, your LTL, what sometimes happens is you get your stuff, it actually arrives and you can see it in Seller Central and it arrived, but then it doesn't get checked in for weeks. And that has happened in the past with sellers. It's because that warehouse is maybe backlogged and your trailer is just sitting there in the parking lot for that time until they are ready to unpack it. So live unload is usually done when you are working with someone outside of the Amazon network. And what that is they'll drive up to the dock and they'll unload. So when they arrive, they unload. The arrival time, the delivery time is nearly the same as the check-in time within a couple of days, sometimes. So that's something to ask your 3PL about, is a live unload if it's really an issue for you.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. I think you guys will find also some additional videos and SOPs within this checklist. So remember to go download it in the show notes of this episode. You will find it at thesellerprocess.com or in the description of the YouTube video. Right. Yeah. So Chelsea, I have the last question for you, because we here in this podcast, we're all about efficiency and resource utilization, right? So what is your best advice to achieve more with less when it comes to inventory management?
Sure. It's important to have systems in place. So inventory is all about keeping track of systems, and you're very busy, especially people who are solopreneurs or maybe have a couple of assistants or a couple of employees, to have systems in place so that you can have tasks put off of you and onto someone else. Because a lot of the most valuable tasks aren't necessarily going to be figuring out your forecasting, but they can be the most expensive things to make mistakes on. So you want to make sure that you're passing off those tasks so that you can focus on whether it's, product sourcing, product launch, marketing your best sellers. Those are very valuable at driving revenue. If you have a system which we call min-max restocking, that helps to kind of place the bumpers or the guide rails for you to pass certain inventory tasks on to the rest of your team, so you can focus on the revenue driving activities. And what that is having not just a buffer stock, but also a maximum. So you say, I want 30 days worth of inventory, no less than 30 days and no more than, let's say, 75 or 90 days, whatever it is for your business. Maybe it's 60 days. And when I hit the point where I'm about to hit 30 days worth of inventory, I need to transfer inventory into Amazon. You have to factor your transfer time in. So if it's 10 days transfer and 30 days buffer, transfer at 40 days. So 40 days before you hit, you're going to want to transfer inventory and stock up to that maximum, transfer down to that minimum. So it allows the assistant or whoever's working with you to have a lot of questions answered. How much do I send in? When do I send in? Those are the main questions, and that gives them those answers without having to really ask you.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Lots of great tips. Thank you, Chelsea, again for sharing all this. And before we close, tell people how can they reach out to you and how can you help them in case they would like to learn more about you.
Sure. If you go to sostocked.com/connect, there are all of our social media. You can reach out to me there. There's a demo for SoStocked, and then we have a link to our free tools. We have tools that help to plan getting your marketing in sync with your inventory team. We have a DIY spreadsheet for inventory if you're not ready to start with the software. And then we have something called the carton pallet calculator, which helps you to see if you're optimizing your shipping or if there's a way to reduce your storage and your handling fees.
Awesome. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Chelsea. Remember, guys, the key to success is to emulate the best. So take action on the tips that Chelsea just shared. Remember to download the checklist at thesellerprocess.com or in the YouTube video description, and take action, put into practice all these tips, and have a productive week. And I'll see you in the next episode. Hey, entrepreneurs, I hope you enjoyed the episode and learned something from the interview. If you're serious about creating systems for your business, automating processes and building up your team so that you can transfer the tedious daily tasks in order to focus on more high-level strategic tasks and work on your business and not in your business, I've created a guide for Amazon sellers named Capturing Systems and Creating SOPs that you can find at thesellerprocess.com/systems ebook, where you will learn how to leverage systems and SOPs in your Amazon business so that you can accomplish more by working less, optimize your time, automate and delegate tasks, and reap the benefits of being a true business owner and not simply an operator in your own business. Go download the ebook at thesellerprocess.com/systems ebook and start implementing all the tips and insights that I share with you. And leave us a review or a comment to let us know how the content we are sharing here is making an impact in your business. And have a productive week.